If you're a little confused by the intro, what you're seeing is the OEM wheels from a Mark IV Golf fitted onto my Corolla hatchback. The OEM manufacturer for these wheels was actually BBS, and this specific model is called the Montreal 2. So why would you want to buy OEM wheels for your car? I.e., why would you want Volkswagen wheels for your Toyota? There are many reasons a person can go this route, but here are a couple. As much as many of us lust over wanting aftermarket wheels, some of these big-name car manufacturers actually contract out these big-name companies to make their wheels. For example, like BBS, or in this case, if you can see on my Toyota Corolla hatchback, the OEM wheels are actually made by Enki. These are a strong set of wheels and are great quality and have a fairly high strength for any budget racing application. Speaking of budget, used wheels tend to be cheap. You can buy them on Facebook Marketplace, Kijiji, Craigslist, local junkyards, local buy and sell websites, etc., etc. You can fix them up for cheap, or you can just use these to practice like painting their wheels or hydro dipping or plasti dipping. And because they are fairly high strength, you can test them to their limit at the track without worrying about any of these wheels falling apart. Now, before we get into talking about searching for new wheels, the first thing we have to do is actually define some terms. Now, first of all, I'm not going to go into detail about these terms. There's many good YouTube videos out there, but we'll just go over a couple of them quickly. Now, the first thing we'll talk about is tire size, or the numbers that you'll see on the sidewall of your tire. For this example, we're using 195/55 R16. So the 195 itself represents the width of the tire in millimeters, or 195 millimeters. The 55 represents profile, or the aspect ratio, which will show you how much sidewall or the total height of the tire will be. And the 16 denotes the actual diameter of the wheel. So you'll have a 16-inch wheel that will be fitting onto that specific tire. Next, we have wheel width versus wheel diameter from this diagram here. So the diameter would be 17 inches, but your width in comparison would be 8.5 inches. And you can find these details actually on the inside of most rims. You can also find the details of offset inside of your rims. Now, just to quickly explain, offset is the amount of offset or the amount of poke or tuck your wheel will have in comparison to your car. So from this diagram here, the less offset you have, the more poke you will have, but the more offset you have, the more tuck you will have. And so this is something that you'll have to keep in mind when you're looking for wheels as well. The center bore size is the center of the wheel, the center hole of the wheel, or this protruding piece on your wheel hub itself. And so obviously on the wheel, the center bore size can't be smaller than the one on your hub. It has to be of equal or larger size. And lastly, we have bolt pattern. Bolt pattern is specific to the amount of lug nuts that you have on your car and the total diameter of those lug nuts. So for example, on my car, I have a total of 5 lug nuts here, or 5 studs. So it denotes the 5 in the first part, and the 100 would mean that it's a 100 millimeter circular diameter as a result. Therefore, my bolt pattern is 5 by 100. So in order to find bolt pattern, the first thing we're going to do is go into Google and type in the year of our car, the make, and the model, followed by the words wheel size, and then just hit enter. And the first thing we're going to be looking for is actually this website called wheelsize.com. So we're going to click on that. It's going to give us a bunch of options for the different market that we may specifically find this car. I know mine's Canadian, and I know it's the E210 chassis, but you may need to do more research into it. But in this case, I'm just going to click the USA one because I know it's the exact same. And here, if you don't know the engine, that might be something you need to look up as well. A lot of the wheel sizes tend to be the same, even if the engines are different. But I know mine's the 2.0, and it'll bring me down over here into this section. So that's great. We already have the bolt pattern right here of 5 by 100. And then we also know something important here, which is the center bore of 54.1 millimeters. So I'm just going to bring over my notepad, and we're going to note down here the bolt pattern is 5 by 100 and the center bore is 54.1. So this will be the starting point of what we have to look up here too. Now that we have that information, the next thing you want to do is actually go to the tire sidewall of your car and check to see if the tire information matches. So in this case, mine is going to say 205/55 R16, and that R16 specifically means that the OEM wheel size is 16 inches. And I actually know that because I've flipped the wheel around and I've actually looked at this information here of the 7J by 16 by plus 40 offset. But you may not know that, so the best way to check is actually by the tire. Now, the other thing we want to know is actually the width, or the width of the wheel itself. And that's what that 7J denotes, and you can find that once again on the back of the wheel like you'll see here. And that ET40 you see there, that actually denotes the offset by millimeters, so I'll put that as well. So now we know all that OEM information, and if you actually wanted to change your wheels, you could use this information instead. So you can up gauge to an 8-inch by 8-inch width wheel by 18-inch diameter by 40 millimeter offset, and you'd be good to go because it's already used on higher trims of this car. But if you wanted to go a different route, if you wanted to go for the 16 inches, or if you wanted to go for 17 or something, you could as well. In this case, we're going to start with the bolt pattern and the center bore, and then we're going to go from there. Now, the next thing we'll do is, now that we know the bolt size and the center bore, we're actually going to go all the way to the top, and we're just going to go to wheel fitment data, and under that, we're going to go to bolt patterns and click there. And we know what our bolt pattern is. You can see the 5x100, so I'm going to click on that next. And then this gives us a list of everything that we could possibly find that has a 5x100 bolt pattern. In this case, we're just going to scroll all the way down to Volkswagen. And then we're going to see, I kind of like the Golfs of this era, the 1992 to 2006. So I'm going to click on that. And then we can see like all of these wheels that could possibly fit. So the ones we want specifically are this one, the 1997 to 2006. So then I'm just going to select a wheel that matches up to that era of 1997 to 2006. So this one looks interesting. Let's go to that one. I guess we'll go to the 2002 variation. And then of course we want Canada, or I guess US as well. But in this case, we'll go to Canada. And then any of these would be interesting. So now that we're on this website, these are all really nice wheels, but how do we know what each of them look like? We know that the bolt pattern's 5x100 and the center bore is actually slightly different. Now, that's perfectly fine as long as it's larger. I'll get back into that later. But for now, we know the bolt pattern's the same, but how do we know what the wheels look like? How do we know if they're going to be a good fit and all that? So what we're going to do now is we're going to open up another tab, go to Google and type in originalwheels.com. And we're just going to go to this website. Now, this is a great website and a great tool because it tells you about all the different specs of all these different cars. I'm not sure if it'll apply to, the Asian markets and all that kind of stuff. For Canadian and US markets, it'll be fine. In this case, I'm looking for Volkswagen wheels, so I'm going to click on Volkswagen. And then we're looking for the Golf specifically. And just in this case, I think I'll just click on 2000 because I think that's approximately the range of the wheels that I want. And then we get all these different wheels shown up and all the information about it. We can see here, like the lug pattern is 5 lugs by 100 millimeters. And then it tells us, other things like the size of the wheels and the width of the wheels as well. So now I have like an image, I have the actual specs, and I can look into all this kind of information as to whether these wheels will fit or not. So here's the Montreal 2s that I was looking at before, and we have all this information here for whether the wheels may or may not fit. So we're going to take all of that and go to the next website. So now I've recorded down all the new specs from this new wheel that I want here. So what we're going to do is open another tab and type in will they fit. And this is the website that we want, willtheyfit.com. And it's a great website for comparing one-to-one all the different information of your old wheels versus your new wheels. So give me 1 second here to just type in the details. All right, so I've mostly matched up the details from the old size to the new size here. The only issue I'm having right now is I can't type in 6.5 as it'll just give me 65. So I'll type in 6, then I'll add 1/2 inch, and there you go. Now you can see I'm comparing the old size of the Toyota Corolla to the new size of the Volkswagen wheels. And now I know the tires will match here because they're both 16 inches, but if not, then you may need to consult the tire shop or something about what specific tire size you're going to need before and after. But in this case, I know I can take the original tires and put them onto the new one, and I know these are the specs here, so I'm just going to hit calculate, and then it's going to show me here how well these wheels fit in, and I'll zoom in just to show you that a little bit better. But you can see here that the existing size is the yellow, and then the new size is the green, and you can see that means that the wheels are going to be pushed in a little because the width is off by 1/2 inch. But you know, there's not going to be any interference with the suspension. The spokes shouldn't interfere with the brakes or anything like that. Now, this website is a great starting point to making sure if your wheels will fit or not, but a lot of the time this is not a good representation of real life, because sometimes the spokes do interfere with the brakes, and so sometimes you may have to ask the community or ask people online if they've seen things fit, and if not, it may end up being just trial and error of you buying a wheel, seeing if it fits or not, which is exactly what I had to do for this Volkswagen one. Now, because the size of the tire is the same, the size of the wheel is the same, the width is pretty damn close, and the offset is pretty damn close too, I knew there was relatively low risk in going for a setup like this, which is why I ended up buying those wheels to begin with. So in this case, it's like a good sort of starting point to determine whether these wheels will actually be fitting your car or not. The other thing about offset is sometimes there is a maximum, sometimes there is a minimum, and you may not always know what that maximum or that minimum is. So in this case, I did have a friend who did get a wheel with an offset of 55. And when you compare that with the OEM ones, you can see that from the green, it's significantly inwards. So you're pretty close to the hub. And he said the spokes are actually pretty close to the brake caliper themselves. So you had barely enough clearance. He said if you go anywhere up to like a 60, and the more positive, the more inwards it goes, you'd probably have difficulties with. So if I put that back to say like a 40, you can see it goes back to its normal position, or approximately close to 40, or approximately close to its normal position. But then if I go to something like a 30, you're going to get more poke with that wheel. So the wheels are going to come outwards more, and that might help with the clearance. So keep all that in mind with offset, that offset is pretty important, and that the width of the wheel also does affect how much of an offset there is. So you can see with an 8.5, it pokes out a lot, but it also comes in closer towards the suspension as well. So play with this tool, have fun with it, see like what kind of different sizes may or may not fit. And of course, it's not always indicative of real life, but it's a good starting point. Now, one thing I do want to add is you could add spacers. Now, I don't really enjoy the concept of spacers, but I'll try and explain the concept here. So if we take the same wheel sizes here, what you can do is you can add some spacers in, and they have to be like a small amount if you're just using this type. So let's say if you take a 10 millimeter spacer, right? What you're doing is you're decreasing that offset by 10. So we'll go from a 40 down to a 30. And you're going to see the yellow one is going to come to the left there. Or sorry, the green one is going to come to the left. And now you're making it poke more towards the left. And it's going away from the suspension. So if you got a 20 millimeter spacer, you'd go from 40 down to a plus 20. And you can see it now comes out more to left, more away. Now there is some issues with it because you're adding another piece in between your wheels to kind of bring them out more. And that is another failure point. You could affect your wheel bearings, your suspension geometry, all that kind of stuff. And then if you get these kind of bolt-on spacers too, instead of the slip-on ones, the bolt-on ones you have to bolt to your studs, and then you take the other wheel and then you bolt that on into the spacers themselves. And so you can see you're adding a whole degree of complexity and a whole plethora of possible issues. So if you want to go that route, by all means do, but just know you might be increasing the wear on your tires, on your suspension, on all the different components within your car. So usually I stray away from the spacers and try and stick to just the OEM wheel by itself. Now let's say, for example, you were upsizing to a 17-inch wheel and you wanted a different tire size, for example, and you didn't know what tire size to get, another great tool is called tire size comparison. And if you put that into Google, you should come up to this website called tiresize.com. And this is a great tool because it'll actually show you the differences between certain tires. So right now I'm comparing the same sized tires at the same width, but let's say I wanted to go to a 17-inch wheel right there, and you can see, oh, okay, if I had this specific tire size of 205/55, it's going to affect my speed. That way I'm going to get a little bit less sidewall or maybe the same sidewall. And this is a good place to start for getting tire sizes. Now, just so you know, 205 is the specific width here. So the 8.1 inches, that's 205 millimeters. And the aspect ratio is just showing like how large the tire is. So if I wanted to bring the sizes down a little bit closer, what I could do is go to a 50, for example. The tire that's compatible with the 16-inch wheels is now kind of similar to the tire that's compatible with the 17-inch wheels. So now this is just one piece of information in case you wanted to go back to the this website here and instead put in, oh, okay, I wanted a 17-inch with a 50, and then you wanted to calculate it. You can see like, oh, okay, the tires are now slightly different. Will the tires rub with anything? All that kind of stuff. So these are two great tools that you can play around with to see the fitment of your tires and your wheels and all that on your specific car. So we can now compare the two wheels that we have, our OEM ones versus the new ones that we're looking to get. So the bolt pattern is the same, the wheel diameter is the same in this case. It might be slightly different for you. The OEM width is slightly different. The OEM offset is slightly different. So all those factors are okay, but the one part that we have not talked about yet is the OEM bore size, as the bore size is currently larger than what we have on our car. So I've taken the wheel off here. What you can see is actually the hub size for the Corollas. The hub size for the Corolla is 54.1 millimeters. For the Montreal 2s, it's 57.1 millimeters. So the hub size is just this little circle in the middle there. And so I have a 3 millimeter hub ring that goes onto here that prevents or brings that tolerance together. So they're both closer together now. So just to explain that a little differently, the outside diameter, the 57.1 millimeters for the hub centric ring, is equivalent to the wheel's center bore of 57.1 millimeters. And the inner diameter of 54.1 millimeters for the hub centric ring is equivalent to the vehicle hub lip or center bore on my car. So when you're looking this up on Amazon or any other website, what you'd be searching for is something like 57.1 millimeter outside diameter to 54.1 millimeter inside diameter hub centric ring, or whatever your actual specifications are. You'd sub in those numbers accordingly. Now, you may also need a different set of lug nuts as well. There are many different lug nut types, lug bolt types, and lug seat types. So you may have to do a little bit more research about the ones that you need. I did need different lug nuts. I got a tuner lug nut that had the conical kind of style and a conical seat, so to speak, because my wheels are actually, the Volkswagen wheels are actually lug centric. Now, your wheels themselves may be lug-centric or hub-centric, and it'd probably be best to do some research about what the two different types mean, but I'll explain a little quickly. Lug-centric just means that the wheels are centered on the studs, and hub-centric means it's centered on the hub or the center bore itself. So for me, I needed new lug nuts, but I didn't necessarily need the new hub-centric rings. That being said, I still bought the hub-centric rings anyways because I wanted to minimize the risk, and they are very affordable. And when I say minimize risk, what I mean is that the lug-centric wheels are centered on the lugs or the studs themselves, and because of that, all the weight rests on that as well. Now, when you purchase the hub-centric rings, what you're doing is now the weight is also resting on the hub or the center bore and on the lugs or the studs themselves. Therefore, you're reducing the amount of load that's going onto one versus the other. You're distributing it between both, therefore minimizing risk of wear and tear and other things like that. It's up to you to do more research to figure out whether you need the lug nuts or the hub-centric rings, or if you want to just do both to minimize your risk. As always, please subscribe if you enjoy this kind of content, and I hope this has given you some sort of direction or has helped you in some sort of way. And have yourself a lovely day.